Hello, and welcome to episode 36 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp, and with me, as always, are Michael Ronn and Jamie Maltman. How are you guys doing?
Great. How's it going, Patrick?
Pretty good. Jamie, how you doing?
I'm good, too.
Good. So we're going to start off, as always, talking about what we've been reading over the last week, and I think I'm going to switch it up and not go left to right, which means we'll start in the middle with Michael.
Oh, I knew you were going to hit me first. All right. Well, I actually have started to get back on the horse. I picked up Claudia Altucher's new book, which was How to Be an Idea Machine. Have you guys read it?
That's a book that should take you a minimum of 180 days to read. So reading it in the process.
Well, you can read the preface. I think the first couple of chapters. Interesting stuff. I mean, basically, it's kind of along the same lines of Altucher and Choose Yourself. That ideas are the currency of the 21st century, and if you spend 180 days or half a year coming up with 10 ideas a day, then you'll become an idea machine. Basically, and I like the premise. I think she said between 10 to 20, and I've been doing a few of the exercises every day. I mean, she basically you can take that as you will, or you can actually do the guided prompts because I think she has 180 of them in the book. So yeah.
Yeah, the first 90 days I believe are about becoming an idea machine, and then I suppose maybe you could jump ahead and maybe she gets into some more information there, but I believe the second 90 days is more about learning how to share those ideas freely with other people.
That's good to know.
While probably still coming, so I don't know, but I think it shifts a little bit into the other side of it. So yeah, it's really about the mental leg of Altucher's four-leg table or whatever.
Daily practice.
Yep, the daily
Definitely.
practice.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I will admit, it probably could have used another copy of it, but we won't go there. It just seems like there's a lot of typos in it, but a little bit, way more than I would expect in a book. But yeah, so I read that, and then I also read Write Your Novel from the Middle by James Scott Bell. Been on a Scott Bell kick these last couple of weeks, and it's an interesting premise. I mean, he's. I think you guys are familiar with him. He's done all of the. He did a lot of the Writer's Digest books, and he's kind of a craft guy and a writing coach. And I like a lot of the stuff that he has to say. And this book in particular, I think, is probably one of his best books, if you guys have read any of the other ones, because he talks about how it actually makes a lot more sense to start your novel from the middle, because there's this particular moment, and he uses a lot of movies as an example, but there's a particular moment in the middle, it's called the miracle moment, when that tells you everything what your novel or what a movie or what a book should be about. And if you know what that miracle moment is, then you can take that and go to the end of your novel, go to the beginning of your novel, and it just all comes together. And I really liked the way that he laid it out. It made a lot of sense. So I'm going to try that with the next book I write. And
cool.
Yeah, and then still just plucking along with American Gods.
Cool.
So
and I think
where are you up to
your
now?
mic is. Sorry, I was just gonna say, Michael, your mic is tapping on your shirt again.
Is it? Oh boy, I hate that. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I need to get one of those desk mics. It's kind of annoying. So sorry for the audience if you're listening to me tap dance while I talk. But yeah, so I'm not much further along in American Gods than I was last week. I guess I'm just blowing it. I don't know what it is. It's one of those novels where you start it and you just have to keep the momentum, because if you don't, then I don't know. I got to get back on it. I've been shockingly negligent. In what is like the best novel I've probably ever read, I just can't pick it up and read the other half of it. I don't know what it is, but yeah, that's me. How about you, Jamie?
I was just gonna say I've been having fun with because my wife I convinced her to read Neverwhere. So I actually convinced her to read Ocean at the End of the Lane, so she liked that, and then she liked Neverwhere even more. So she just finished that last night. So it's been cool chatting about it, and because it's pretty fresh in my mind to be able to go through that and say, oh, where are you up to? And it's been really cool. So I like that. So what have I been reading? Let's see. I've got the physical books of the one. So I actually had a finishing week there. Actually, a finishing day yesterday. So I did finish Consider the Fork by B. Wilson.
Nice.
So again, the one, A History of How We Cook and Eat. So the like it was really cool. Like she basically breaks it up by sections, so it's like pots and pans and like the history of pots and pans and how different basic technologies and different things and the things that people had to overcome and how it's culturally different. So for each one she does that. So she did it for pots and pans, and then for knives, and then for fire and ovens and everything related to that. For measuring, for grinding, for eating, like techniques for eating, so like the fork or using hands or chopsticks or what have you. And then ice and preservation, and then the kitchen as a whole. And I love this kind of stuff. Like it really reminded me, I don't know if I said it here, but they were saying it to someone else, but that Connections TV show that was on PBS back in like the early 90s, where he'd take an idea or an invention and trace it to the next thing that it inspired and the next thing. And the really cool thing she talks about is how, sometimes there's these breakthrough things that really change things for the better and are accepted, and the old thing becomes obsolete. But more often than not, it's just sort of cultural changes or requirements of the times, and like things have gotten a lot more complex at different times in terms of the number of utensils that you use, and then they get a lot simpler again, and then a fad comes in, and then something else changes. And even just today, talking about the difference between sort of the rustic and whole foodies type stuff on one end, and then like the very scientific, like food physics, crazy stuff that they do with all the sous vide stuff and everything at the other end. So it's really, I don't know, I really like that. Totally my kind of nonfiction book. And then we finally finished Bone 9, so we were finished the full series. And actually, you guys had made me think it was going to be more sad and dark than it actually turned out to be. So I thought it wrapped up things pretty well. I thought it had a good ending that didn't actually neatly tie up absolutely everything, but like for the most part, all the characters came back. My quiche guys were back. All that all that came together in the end. So and Alex really liked it, my son, and he actually said, he's like, so when are we going to read it again? I'm like, whoa, hold on. It's been like almost every night for like 3 months, maybe like 2.5 months. So I think we're going to try the Rose one next, but my wife said she was like, oh, you might not like that as much.
Yeah, Rose was okay.
Because you already know the ending, really.
It's funny. Basically. It only takes you like 3 months to build a habit like that, right? He wants to keep going. I think I remember feeling that when I started listening to the self-publishing podcast, where I was about 90 episodes behind. So it was like one episode a night for 90 days, and also listening to new ones as they were kind of coming. Got to the end they got caught up, and I was like, oh, this sucks. I want more, but anyway.
Hey, Jamie, another book you would like, you might, since you consider the fork, you might like Cooked by Michael Pollan, which is the subtitle is A Natural History of Transformation, and he talks about the different types of cooking and how our conception of eating has evolved over the last decade with the advent of big food, agriculture, and making everything easier and more convenient, and what it actually means to actually sit down and have a meal, and the history behind that. It might be something you could check out too. I thoroughly enjoyed that one.
Cool. Okay, I'll check that out for sure. I was going to say the other one I just started. This was kind of a funny story. One of the online book clubs that I keep track of what books they read was reading. What was it called? Fool's Apprentice? No, Fool's Assassin, which is like a newer book by Robin Hobb. And I've never read any of her books, so I wanted to. It's someone that's been on my list, so I was like, oh, okay, I'll go check that out. So I immediately went into my library thing when I saw the little email, I think, from Goodreads, and reserved it, and then it popped up, and then I saw it, and it was a big, thick book, and I was like, oh, wow, okay. So, but it was like book 1 of this series, and then I looked into it, and it's like the 3rd series with those characters. So I'm like, oh, I don't want to start book 7. I want to go back to book 1. So I did pick up. So I didn't read that one, but I picked up book 1. Very first one, which is Assassin's Apprentice, on Overdrive. So I've been reading that on my phone because that's the only way that I could use the kids' tablets, but that's kind of annoying. So I started that. I'm about maybe 30% of the way through that, and overall enjoying it so far. It's very sort of classic, sort of fantasy story where it's it's following a kid learning from his sort of apprenticing. And now he's apprenticing in assassin-y stuff, but which is kind of cool. And he's actually a bastard child of the Lord, but has been taken in by the castle. So there's some different angles with that. And then again, I'm 30% there. And another one I just started was the other nonfiction one I had from the library, which is Whole Earth Discipline by Stuart Brand, which is an eco-pragmatist manifesto. This is one that actually Hugh Howey had recommended at some point in the last couple of months on his blog. And I read like the first, it's from 2009, but it's a guy who's been very involved in looking at a lot of environmental stuff, and he's looking at, okay, so realistically we have to do things, but I'm not the ideologue that some people are going to try and be in the environmental movement. So what can we realistically do and convince people that we can do collectively as a species to ward off issues with climate change, kind of thing. So I just started that, and man, the first like 17 pages where he sort of lays out his case, it's pretty damn depressing, like of where we're going and what there's proof for. So anyway, so that's one, and then the other one that I'm going to start real soon too is this one that I got from the library, which is Neil Gaiman's Midnight Days, which is a collection. I don't know if you guys have read it, but it's like a collection of some of his early single issue comic type stuff from before Sandman, I guess. So that's what's next, and I had a bunch of physical books to show for it. So there you go, cool. Patrick. What have you been up to?
Well, I was just going to say too, if you're reading about sort of climate change and global warming, it's you should. There was reading an article today about how they've found that they've been faking a lot of the temperature data over the last several decades to make it look worse than it really is, or that it's anything when it's not. But might be interesting to look that up and kind of see the other side.
The crazy thing with that one was just the vicious circles or whatever, the positive feedback loops that are anything but positive, when it's just like the things that are like, once this starts, it triggers this, which triggers this, which triggers this, and there's like 4 or 5 of them to do with oceans or the Arctic or the tundra or whatever, and it's really scary stuff. So anyway. So
I started and finished a novel by Dan C. Rennert called Dan's Lame Novel. Have you heard of this one?
You're updated about that. I don't know what the heck that is. I'm curious now to find out what
he wrote it with the intention, and he lays it out at the beginning, that he set out to write, the world's lamest novel, and he succeeded. It's pretty lame. It's a tough book to kind of talk about and review, because anything that you could say bad about it or negative, you kind of have to look at it. It's like, well, he did say it was going to be lame, right? Like, he reuses some of the same sort of jokes over and over again, and well, that's lame. It's probably in keeping with what he was going for. So it's a really maybe a little bit, it's kind of stream of consciousness, and he breaks the fourth wall. He talks to the reader. Every chapter kind of starts, and sometimes even in the middle of a chapter, he starts by telling you, well, it's been 24 hours and 36 minutes since I last wrote, and he has this there's sort of rules that he laid out in the beginning of the book, which says that the main character, whose name is Dryervent, by the way, has no initiative or no autonomy. Like, he has no agency unless the author is writing. So whereas everybody else, all the other secondary characters in the book, kind of continue on with their lives. So in between chapters, the main character is kind of left standing in place while the world continues to kind of move around him. Anyway, it's a relatively short book. It's pretty damn lame, and it's an interesting kind of tongue-in-cheek read, just almost as an experiment. So I don't know if I would recommend it unless you want to read something that really is lame. So I enjoyed it. It like I said, it was an experiment. It was an interesting read.
Mission accomplished. Lame.
Yes, it's very lame. I'm curious actually to read. It was good enough that I'm interested in reading some of his other stuff that's maybe less lame and more sort of a coherent story. But I'll have to look into that. And then I continued reading Peter Klein's X series. I'm on the 3rd book in the series now, called Excommunication. So I should finish that up for next week. And I also kind of picked up a book that I started reading a while ago and then kind of put down, which is the Book of Jareg by Stephen Brust. And I'm only about 50 pages in, but I have a pretty clear feeling that that'll be a series that I'll kind of probably end up highly recommending to you, Jamie, when it's done. It's very fantasy. The main character is an assassin. But anyway, I'll talk about more of that as I finish off the books. This book, The Book of Durag, is like a collection of the first 3 books in this series that I think is 17 or 18 books in, I believe. And that was my reading.
Cool.
So we'll move on to our topic of the week, which is what to do when you're in a reading slump. And I'll let Michael kind of start this one off. I think it was your idea. You've been in a bit of a slump yourself, Michael?
Yeah, this last couple of weeks has just been awful from a reading standpoint. I mean, I guess some things in my personal life have happened, and also been writing a book and finishing that up, and just kind of like the perfect storm for putting reading on the back burner. And I don't know about you guys, but like when that happens, I feel like I'm just out of commission for like a couple of weeks, and then when I get back on the horse, I'm reading like 5 books a week. So I guess it all ends up evening out, throughout the course of the year. But it just seems like it's when I get in these slumps, it's just so hard to even think about picking up a book. And if I do want to pick up a book,
sorry, I was just going to say, it sounds like you're talking about being too busy to read, but is it also when you do have those moments, you just don't feel it?
Yeah, well, it's not so much being too busy to read. It's just when I think about reading, it's like, okay, well, there's something else that I could be doing. And it could either be writing, it could be reading, or not reading, but anything but reading.
Right.
And so I choose not to read. And then I just keep making those decisions throughout a couple of days, and then it adds up. And then I've got a book like American Gods that's just sitting there, So that, at least that's how I find that it happens. When I have like 15 minutes and I could be reading, maybe I choose to, I don't know, do something around the house. Although, not to say that I neglect my house, but there's just always something else that pops up, and then all that stuff goes away, and then you can go back to reading as normal, and it all ends up being good. But I was just curious to see if that's ever happened to you guys.
I do. If I go 3 or 4 days without sitting down, and I mean not just the 5 minutes here and there throughout the day, but if I go 3 or 4 days without actually sitting down and doing some solid reading, I start to feel out of sorts, almost like, yeah, a little bit. I need bourbon in a book, or yeah. No, I do. It's I don't know. It kind of centers you. Maybe it's to sit down and just consume in that way. It's just I guess just a part of who I am. I guess I need it. But there are times where I just don't feel like reading, and I find, so when I was thinking about the topic, I was thinking, I think I feel it mostly when I've just finished something, and so I have this problem of too much choice, and
yeah,
it's due to the e-reader. It's due to the fact that it is just so easy to click that buy button on Amazon, and your list just grows and grows and grows. And so I'll finish reading something, and I'll go to my carousel and on the Kindle or on the Kobo, and I'm just presented with 30 or 40 books that I've downloaded, and I just don't know where to start. And so none of them seem appealing, or the ones that do, I think maybe I should read something else. And then sometimes there may also be lack of choice.
Yeah.
Just in the sense that nothing is really appealing. I think I found that more when I would go to the bookstore or the library and just kind of stand in front of the shelf and look at all the spines and maybe read a couple blurbs on the back and just, meh, I don't want to read that because I've read something like it, recently, or just those times where no matter what it is, it just, for some reason, you just don't feel it.
Or the worst thing that I do is I'll be in like a bookstore on Amazon and like, yeah, this book doesn't sound interesting right now, but then I buy it anyway, and then like 2 months later, then it's on my Kindle and it's like, I don't feel like reading that. It's like a vicious cycle,
And the book length too can I just downloaded The Stand, and I'll look at that and I'll go, oh God, that's going to take me 3 weeks to read. So maybe I'll read this other thing that I'm maybe not as interested in, but at least I can get through it and get it off my list. I find though usually I don't know, it's like a Band-Aid. You just have to rip it off, right? I find that even if I'm not feeling it, if I just sit down and just pick one and start reading the darn thing, I'll get sucked in.
Yeah, that or you read it and then realize, yeah, I don't want to read that, and then you find something else, and then ends up being okay.
Yep.
But it's just like, yeah, it's the act of sitting down and actually doing it. It's the hard part.
Okay. What about you, Jamie?
I was gonna say, like, I've on the day-to-day level, like now, like since I started reading consistently again, I don't know, several years ago now, if I don't read, like I read before bed damn near every night. If I go to bed really late, I might not, but then I often will read the next morning before I get up to do anything. I might read a little bit. So, but that's like 90% of my reading is either, well, son before he goes to bed, or the little guy too sometimes now with his Thomas books, or before I go to bed. So because that's my routine, like I've always got to have something fiction, and that's always the fiction. If it nonfiction, I'm a little bit more sporadic. Like that Consider the Fork I had actually at the kitchen table. So I would, if I'm just eating something by myself, I would sit and read that. Or if the kids were off doing something while I was eating, then I would read some of that. Or if my wife felt like reading Neverwhere, then I was reading more of that. So we were actually, a lot of the time, both of us sitting at the kitchen table reading through this last little while. So I think part of it is because reading is, like, I have a lot of things that I do, like for fun. Like, it's not just reading. So I think that almost helps me. Like, it's like I might play a little phone game or something like that a little bit before I start my reading at night. So that's the only thing that I might do. I might delay a little bit, and then I'm like, okay, now I'll read. And read, like, I might read less than I would have otherwise, but I still end up reading that night. And like I also, because I follow my Toronto Raptors and I have a lot of stuff to do with that, and then the other stuff we're doing with the kids and movies and some TV shows, and like I have a whole bunch of interests. Reading is a big one, but it's not the only one. So I think maybe it's like I don't have as much pressure on it in that way, so I might not get into that kind of a slump for that reason, just because it's one of many. But at the same time, like I like when I was young, like high school or middle school or before, I could sit and read all day. And whereas now I don't. Like I rarely read for more than like if I read for 3 hours straight, that'd be a long, long time. And I probably really got sucked into the very end of a book and started a little bit, like my kids went to bed a little earlier, and I read from like midnight till 3 or something.
I think the other interests thing too, like if I don't feel like reading, there are other ways to consume story that are faster, certainly, and maybe get you kind of back in a groove. I've recently started watching some more movies. I kind of got away from that for a while, and picked up a couple new TV shows that I've just started watching. The new 12 Monkeys.
I've got it on the show. Haven't started it yet. How is it? Good.
It's good. It's I think the 4th episode just came out. I think I haven't watched it yet, but
I think there's a little 4 next to my PVR there. So
it's good. If you don't go in it expecting the movie, the TV show is very interesting. And I started watching Continuum. So just they're good. It's a good 45-minute. A quick story, to get into a story, get into a new world, and it's just a different way to consume. But reading's always my primary choice. But there are other ways that are just as enjoyable, and I just try not to binge watch.
Yeah, that'll wreck you pretty quickly if you're trying to write, especially. Yeah, that's the cool thing. I think the light bulb that's going off over my head as I hear you guys talk is like reading every day. Like I used to do that. Like I used to actually have a ritual, where I would sit down every morning, read before I went to work, and then read after and I just kind of got away from that. And I think maybe if you're reading every day like you guys are, I think it's a lot easier to not fall into a slump, because it's like writing, right? If you write every day, then it just makes it easier. It makes it harder to stop. Or like when you're playing piano, if you miss a day, then you're just going to feel it. And it takes you like a week to catch up. So yeah. I need to get back to that.
And there's a difference too, where I read every single day. I read when I'm on break at work. I read in the elevator. I mean, it's only 30 seconds, but like I always find myself when I'm flipping open my phone, I'm not checking Facebook or email. I'm opening up my e-reader and reading a page. So I get it's just a question of whether or not I actually sit down on the couch and get in a solid hour of, so that may be a way too. If you just pick up and read a page here or there, it'll suck you in enough that you find yourself doing longer sort of stretches, right? And again, same thing with the writing, right? If you write 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, it all adds up.
Yeah, it does. It does, and that's my thing too. Is I used to do all of that, and then once you started writing, it just kind of wrecks that. But yeah, it definitely does add up. I'm more of a binge reader lately. When I have 5-10 minutes, I'm usually writing. But if I'm gonna read a book, I actually sit down and just blitz through it.
So I guess I'm funny that way. Like if I have 5-10 minutes, that's when I'm reading. That's when I read blog posts. A lot of blog posts fits into that. I'll clean through those things, or that's where I do check a little bit of email or some of my Raptors related stuff, or play one of these little games that I'm playing on my phone. Like that fits better for that time. Especially for writing, like I take a little bit to get started with writing. So if I have I'm not good, and I don't do anywhere near my best work in short periods of time. I can proofread for short periods of time. That's totally different stage. But I can't. In some parts of editing, but for like writing my new drafts, that doesn't work for me. If I don't I can't even get myself into the mode if I don't have that long. And I don't know if that might be a similar thing with what you're saying for reading too. Like fiction, I don't like reading less than a chapter at a time, in general, unless there's massive chapters, right? Like that you just have to go from like white break to white break, or curly thing to curly thing. But that normally I want to definitely finish chapters, so I wouldn't read 5-10 minutes. But nonfiction is. But
I find that's one of the reasons I do read when I have that 5-minute or even 30-second, standing in line waiting for a coffee, because then I'm working towards an end. Like I find, email never ends. Right? No matter how many emails you read, there's always going to be more coming in, right? Neither do blogs. Neither do Facebook posts or Twitter or Google Plus or any of those. And I found that checking those in those little moments really never got me anywhere, right? I've kind of tried to switch my habits there. I don't have those things on my phone anymore. And I'll check them at night for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'm done. So it kind of minimizes the time I'm wasting on those types of things as well.
I don't know. There's just something with the if I have a block of time and I sit down to like I wouldn't sit down and read blog posts because I feel like I'm wasting time. Mm-hmm. But if I it's kind of like it's a mid form of reading, right? Like because it's not as short as those status updates and Twitter posts and stuff. It's got some meat to it, but it still feels like if I just sit down to do just that, I'm wasting time. So that's where it does fit that middle thing for me.
Yeah, I've actually cut out a lot of blog posts too, because I honestly found I wasn't reading them, mostly because they're way too long, and so that's something I'm paying attention to, is to understand the blog posts that I do read and try to figure out why. Like Seth Godin, he blogs every single day, and I read it every single day because it's short and sweet. And he always makes an interesting point, and it takes you less than a minute to read it. I will read James Altucher's blog, and his is kind of the opposite. They're extremely long, but they're also usually point form, and again, very interesting, and he always has a point. That's pretty much it these days. If I get a blog post in my email, like something I've signed up for, and I have to scroll 3 or 4 times on the phone to get to the bottom, I'm not even, I might hit the headlines, but I'm not going to read the post. I just don't have time.
Very true. Well, we have a comment. Actually, a couple of comments.
Okay.
David Anson's watching, says hello, everyone. Hi, David. And then Quotidian Light, Maya's watching. She says, I really struggle with reading slumps. They tend to hit after I read something I really didn't enjoy or when I'm really stressed out.
Yep, for sure.
Ditto.
Cool.
The other sort of macro angle to this I was thinking of was, did you have any stretches in your life where you just stopped reading, and how did you get out of that, or how did you get back into reading from that? Because I think there's, from all the stats, there's a ton of people like that out there, if they ever got started in the first place, right? But I know me personally, I've talked a little bit before, that after when I got to university, I was doing tons of reading, but my pleasure reading went way down, and I'd read like maybe a book sometime in the summer, but it broke the reading habit for me for years. And it was only, when I started reading to my kids that it started to get me back into thinking, oh yeah, I could read. I love to read, and I read a lot before, and and as well, I think it was actually reading a Tim Ferriss blog post or hearing him talk about it, of how reading fiction before bed was the only way he could get the ideas to shut up for all his business stuff, right? So,
right.
And I was like, you know what, that's a great idea, and I love to read fiction, and I'll do that. And so I just decided, and haven't really had a problem. Like you're saying, like there's so much choice these days. If I go to the library, like I'll if I don't have something that I know what I'm reading next, I'll end up picking up like 3 books, and probably never get to 2 of them. But I never have a problem deciding. Like, all right, it's always too much choice, like you're saying, rather than feeling like I'm in a slump and nothing seems interesting.
I think there were probably times where I didn't read a lot, but I don't think they, probably back in the day when the kids are really young and in college and early days in a new job, that kind of stuff. But nothing really stands out for me as, a decade that I didn't read or anything like that.
Yeah, same here.
So, yeah. Okay. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up? No, we're good? So let me see here. Next week we're going to be talking about what pulls you out of a story. And in the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. If you can send us an email at tbrpodcast@gmail.com if you'd like to get in touch with us. And be sure to visit our Goodreads page. The link is in the description for the show below. And have a great week. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care.
Happy reading, everyone.